A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Book the Third, The Track of a Storm, Chapter 12, Darkness. Sidney Carton paused in the street, not quite decided where to go. "At Tellson's banking house at 9, he said with a musing face. "Shall I do well in the meantime to show myself? I think so. It is best that these people should know there is such a man as I here. It is a sound precaution, and maybe a necessary precaution, but care, let me think it out." Checking his steps, which had begun to tend toward an object, he took a turn or two in the already darkening street, and traced the thought in his mind to its possible consequences. His first impression was confirmed. "It is best," he said, finally resolved, "that these people should know there is such a man as I here." And he turned his face toward St. Antoine. Defarge had described himself that day as the keeper of a wine shop in the St. Antoine suburb. It was not difficult for one who knew the city well to find his house without asking any questions. Having ascertained its situation, Carton came out of those clever streets again, and dined at a place of refreshment, and fell sound asleep after dinner. For the first time in many years he had no strong drink. Since last night he had taken nothing but a little light thin wine, and last night he had dropped the brandy slowly down on Mr. Lorry's hearth, like a man who had done with it. It was as late as 7 o'clock when he awoke refreshed, and went out into the streets again. As he passed toward St. Antoine, he stopped at a shop window where there was a mirror, and slightly altered the disordered arrangement of his loose cravat, and his coat collar, and his wild hair. This done, he went on direct to Defarge's and went in. There happened to be no customer in the shop but Jacques III, of the restless fingers and the croaking voice. The man whom he had seen upon the jury stood drinking at the little counter, in conversation with the Defarges, man and wife. The Vengeance assisted in the conversation, like a regular member of the establishment. As Carton walked in, took his seat, and asked, in very indifferent French, for a small measure of wine, Madame Defarge cast a careless glance at him, and then a keener, and then advanced to him herself, and asked him what it was he had ordered. He repeated what he had already said. "English?" asked Madame Defarge inquisitively, raising her dark eyebrows. After looking at her as if the sound of even a single French word were slow to express itself in him, he answered, in his former strong foreign accent, "Yes, madam, yes, I am English." Madame Defarge returned to her counter to get the wine, and as he took up a Jacobean journal and feigned to pore over it, puzzling out its meaning, he heard her say, "I swear to you, like Evremond." Defarge brought him the wine and gave him good evening. "How? Good evening. Oh, good evening, citizen," filling his glass. "Ah, and good wine. I drink to the Republic." Defarge went back to the counter and said, "Certainly a little like," Madame sternly retorted. "I tell you a good deal like," Jacques III pacifically remarked. "He is so much in your mind, see you, madam." The amiable Vengeance added with a laugh, "Yes, my faith, and you are looking forward with so much pleasure to seeing him once more tomorrow." Carton followed the lines and the words of his paper with a slow forefinger and with a studious and absorbed face. They were all leaning their arms on the counter close together, speaking low. After a silence of a few moments, during which they had all looked toward him without disturbing his outward attention from the Jacobean editor, they resumed their conversation. "It is true what Madame says," observed Jacques III. "Why stop? There is great force in that. Why stop?" Well, reasoned Defarge, "but one must stop somewhere. After all, the question is still where." "At the extermination," said Madame. "Magnificent," croaked Jacques III. The Vengeance also highly approved. "Extermination is good doctrine, my wife," said Defarge, rather troubled. "In general, I say nothing against it, but this doctor has suffered much. You have seen him today, and have observed his face when the paper was read." "I have observed his face," repeated Madame contemptuously and angrily. "Yes, I have observed his face, and I have observed his face to be not the face of a true friend of the Republic. Let him take care of his face." "And you have observed my wife," said Defarge, in a deprecatory manner. "The anguish of his daughter, which must be dreadful anguish to him." "I have observed his daughter," repeated the Madam. "Yes, I have observed his daughter. More times than one I have observed her today, and I have observed her other days. I have observed her in the court. I have observed her in the street by the prison. Let me but lift my finger," she seemed to raise it, the listener's eyes were always on his paper, "and let it fall with a rattle on the ledge before her," if the axe had dropped. "The citizeness is superb," croaked the juryman. "She is an angel," said the Vengeance, and embraced her. "As to thee," pursued Madame, implacably addressing her husband, "if it depended on thee, which happily it does not, thou wouldst rescue this man even now." "No," protested Defarge. "Not if to lift this glass would do it. But I would leave the matter there. I say, stop there." "See you then, Jacques," said Madame Defarge wrathfully. "And see you too, my little Vengeance. See you both. Listen. For other crimes as tyrants and oppressors, I have this race a long time on my register, doomed to destruction and extermination. Ask my husband, is that so?" "It is so," assented Defarge, without being asked. "In the beginnings of the great days when the Bastille falls, he finds this paper of today, and he brings it home, and in the middle of the night, when the place is clear and shut, we read it, here on this spot, by the light of this lamp. Ask him, is that so?" "It is so," assented Defarge. "That night, I tell him, when the paper is read through and the lamp is burnt out, and the day is gleaming in above those shutters and between those iron bars, that I have now a secret to communicate. Ask him, is that so?" "It is so," assented Defarge again. "I communicate to him that secret. I smite this bosom with these two hands, as I smite it now, and I tell him Defarge was brought up among the fishermen of the seashore, and that peasant family so injured by the two Evremond brothers, as that Bastille paper describes, is my family. Defarge, that sister of the morally wounded boy upon the ground, was my sister. That husband was my sister's husband. That unborn child was their child. That brother was my brother. That father was my father. Those dead are my dead. And that summons to answer for all those things descends to me. Ask him, is that so?" "It is so," assented Defarge once more. "Tell him. Then tell wind and fire where to stop," returned Madame. "But don't tell me." Both her hearers derived a horrible enjoyment from the deadly nature of her wrath. The listener could feel how white she was without seeing her, and both highly commended it. Defarge, a weak minority, interposed a few words for the memory of the compassionate wife of the Marquis, but only elicited from his own wife a repetition of her last reply. "Tell the wind and fire where to stop, not me." Customers entered, and the group was broken up. The English customer paid for what he had had, perplexedly counted his change, and asked, as a stranger, to be directed toward the National Palace. Madame Defarge took him to the door, and put her arm on his, in pointing out the road. The English customer was not without his reflections then, that it might be a good deed to seize that arm, lift it, and strike under it sharp and deep. But he went his way, and was soon swallowed up in the shadow of the prison wall. At the appointed hour he emerged from it to present himself in Mr. Lorry's room again, where he found the old gentleman walking to and fro in restless anxiety. He said he had been with Lucy until just now, and had only left her for a few minutes to come and keep his appointment. Her father had not been seen since he quitted the banking-house toward 4 o'clock. She had some faint hopes that his meditation might save Charles, but they were very slight. He had been more than 5 hours gone. Where could he be? Mr. Lorry waited until 10, but Dr. Manette not returning, and he being unwilling to leave Lucy any longer, It was arranged that he should go back to her and come to the banking-house again at midnight. In the meanwhile, Carton would wait alone by the fire for the doctor. He waited and waited, and the clock struck 12, but Dr. Manette did not come back. Mr. Lorry returned and found no tidings of him, and brought none. Where could he be? They were discussing this question, and were almost building up some weak structure of hope on his prolonged absence, when they heard him on the stairs. The instant he entered the room, it was plain that all was lost. Whether he had really been to anyone, or whether he had been all that time traversing the streets, was never known. As he stood staring at them, they asked him no question, for his face told them everything. "I cannot find it," he said, "and I must have it. Where is it?" His head and throat were bare, and as he spoke with a helpless look straying all around, he took his coat off and let it drop on the floor. "Where is my bench? I have been looking everywhere for my bench, and I can't find it. What have they done with my work? Time presses. I must find those shoes." They looked at one another, and their hearts died within them. "Come, come," he said in a whimpering, miserable way. "Let me get to work. Give me my work." Receiving no answer, he tore his hair and beat his feet upon the ground like a distracted child. "Don't torture a boy!"